Hey guys, tonight we drift further back than memory can hold, sliding into a North Africa that looks nothing like the maps you've scrolled past in school. You feel warm grains of sand pressing at your feet, except the sand hasn't even finished becoming sand yet. It's still mixing with dust, clay, and the crushed remains of plants that would one day fossilize. The air is heavy, as if the desert hasn't yet decided whether it wants to be a swamp or a wasteland. Strange birds call in the distance, though they aren't really birds, not yet. Their wings are stubby, their beaks filled with teeth, and their songs echo like laughter from some awkward rehearsal before the real performance of evolution. You stand there, a little dazed, because you've just time-slipped about 95 million years into the past. That's mid-Cretaceous, give or take a few million, like your phone alarm going off at 7:02 instead of 7 o'clock. Except the margin for error is entire millennia. And while the landscape is beautiful, you probably won't survive this. The heat alone would cook you. The insects are as large as your fist, and even the shadows seem alive. Still, this is not a survival game tonight. It's a slow unraveling of ancient hours, where the goal isn't making it out alive but letting the past roll over you until your own present-day worries feel small. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you. I love picturing all of us scattered across the world, drifting together into the same prehistoric dream. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The sand shifts beneath your toes as you step further into the Cretaceous. It isn't quite Sahara yet, though the bones beneath your feet will one day help create it. Picture a land braided with broad rivers that swell in spring floods and shrink back in dry months, leaving cracked mudflats where the heat bakes the ground until it fractures like pottery. Between these ribbons of water, the land blooms with ferns, cycads, and conifers, plants that look both alien and familiar, a strange garden half recognizable to your modern eyes. And it's here, moving slow as the tide of the Nile itself, that the first whispers of Aegyptosaurus brush against your imagination. You can't see the whole creature yet. It's too far away, cloaked in the shimmer of heat haze, but you feel its weight in the earth. A low, rolling tremor like distant thunder spreads through the soil as it shifts its massive body. Imagine an elephant, but stretched and exaggerated, neck longer than your car, tail sweeping behind like a pendulum. That's the silhouette waiting just beyond the reeds. The funny thing is, when paleontologists first uncovered Aegyptosaurus bones in the early 20th century, they had no idea what a complete skeleton looked like. Bits of vertebrae, ribs, and limb bones, scattered puzzle pieces in the sand. Fossils were packed carefully and shipped to Germany for study, only to be destroyed during an Allied bombing raid in World War II. Somewhere between desert and museum, between science and tragedy, this dinosaur's body was erased again, leaving us with fragments and reconstructions. Historians still argue whether Aegyptosaurus was truly as massive as the famous Argentinosaurus, or whether it played second fiddle in the sauropod orchestra. But none of that matters to you tonight. You're not flipping through dusty papers or footnotes. You're standing in the golden twilight of a land humming with prehistoric life. Cicada-like insects drone, fish splash in the shallows, and the smell of resin and river mud thickens the air. A warm wind brushes your face, carrying dust that might one day harden into the rock layers where fossils hide. You take a deep breath. It tastes earthy, raw, as if the planet hasn't finished seasoning itself yet. You wade a little closer toward the shimmer in the reeds. A dragonfly darts past your head, except this one is the size of a pigeon. It hovers with a mechanical buzz, tilts, and then darts off like a tiny helicopter. That's your quirky tidbit for the evening. While giant dragonflies actually peaked earlier in Earth's history, the Cretaceous still had oversized bugs buzzing around like nature's early prototypes for drones. You can't help but laugh softly, imagining the look on your neighbor's face if one of these crash-landed in their backyard pool. The tremor under your feet grows steadier, closer. You're tempted to peek through the curtain of reeds, but you hesitate. It's not fear, it's more like awe. The sense that you're on the verge of seeing something both impossibly strange and achingly real. You crouch, pressing your fingers into the wet earth, and remind yourself that you are here only as a dreamer. The rules of survival don't apply. You can walk barefoot among giants, and nothing will crush you except the gentle weight of sleep settling into your bones. The sky darkens a little, clouds piling at the horizon like slow, silent waves. You can smell the storm before it arrives, ozone and river water mingling. The first raindrops spatter against your skin, warm as bathwater. Lightning flickers far off, illuminating the silhouette of something enormous moving along the floodplain. For a moment, the neck arches high, then bends down again to strip leaves from a tree that would take 3 of you holding hands to wrap around. You can't see details yet, just that swaying rhythm, the grace of a creature whose heartbeat you almost feel syncing with your own. And then it turns, shifting its massive bulk so that the ground vibrates beneath your feet. You blink against the haze of rain and realize that you're about to get your first true glimpse of Aegyptosaurus. Not as bones in a museum, not as an artist's sketch in a textbook, but as living, breathing history. The reeds sway open in the wind, and you step forward. Your heartbeat slows with the rain's steady rhythm, your thoughts dim with the weight of distance, and you realize the night has only just begun. The rain fades almost as quickly as it began, leaving the floodplain shining under a damp shimmer, every leaf lacquered in water, every puddle filled with the chatter of frogs the size of dinner plates. The reeds part and there, finally, you see it. Aegyptosaurus. The first thing that hits you isn't its head or even its neck, but the sheer length of its body. It stretches on and on, like someone pulled a normal animal at both ends until it became a living suspension bridge. Its back arches gently, and each vertebra seems to move like a hinge in slow motion. You realize how absurdly patient this creature must be. When you have a body longer than a bus, nothing happens quickly. Even the decision to take one step feels like the result of an internal meeting with several committees. The skin is rough, a patchwork of scales that glisten in the fading sunlight. They aren't jewel-like, not the shiny kind of scales you might imagine from a lizard. They're muted, pebble-textured, more like a weathered river stone. The tail sways with hypnotic rhythm, brushing aside branches that would snap like twigs under its bulk. And then that neck. It rises, bends, then dips into the crown of a conifer tree. Branches crackle. Leaves vanish. You watch it chew, slow and grinding, as if dinner will take an entire evening. You take a cautious step closer, not that it notices. You're invisible in this dream space, just a traveler hitching a ride through prehistory. The air smells of crushed greenery now, sharp and almost spicy as sap leaks from broken branches. Somewhere in the distance, another low vibration answers. A second Aegyptosaurus, maybe a whole herd. You imagine the ground shaking beneath dozens of these giants, each step like a drumbeat echoing across the floodplain. And here's a mainstream historical fact. Aegyptosaurus belongs to the Titanosaur family, the heavyweight champions of the sauropod world. These creatures spread across multiple continents, and in some cases reached lengths of 100 feet or more. What made them titanosaurs wasn't just size but resilience, flexible tails, wide hips, and a survival knack that carried them almost to the end of the Cretaceous. They were like the stubborn landlords of the dinosaur era, refusing to move out until the meteor's eviction notice came due. Yet there's something oddly gentle about the way this one moves. It plucks at branches with a soft determination, ignoring the smaller animals fluttering around its feet. A flock of pterosaur-like creatures lifts off nearby, wings catching the damp air, and Aegyptosaurus doesn't even flinch. It's too big to be bothered, too monumental to waste energy on fear. You, standing in the muck, can't help but compare it to watching a cargo ship glide silently across a harbor, vast, inevitable, strangely calming. You crouch lower, eyes level with its knees, which are the size of small tree trunks. Each foot sinks into the mud with a sound like a suction cup being pulled from glass. When it lifts, water gushes back into the impression. Imagine being the animal that has to grow legs strong enough to keep that body moving. You'd never skip leg day again. Here's a quirky tidbit that flickers in your mind. Some paleontologists have joked that sauropods like this were basically walking stomachs. So much greenery went in, and so slowly, that their entire existence revolved around eating and digesting. Picture the world's largest slow cooker, bubbling away for decades. And yet, you wonder if maybe that's part of the appeal. They had no need for speed. Just the steady rhythm of chewing, walking, resting, and repeating. Almost like a prehistoric version of your nightly routine, minus the Netflix. Historians still argue whether Aegyptosaurus roamed in tight herds like elephants or in looser bands that crossed paths only during migrations. Some fossil evidence suggests social movement, while others hint at solitary wanderers. Tonight, in your drifting vision, you imagine both possibilities. Maybe one day this giant finds its herd. Maybe it spends years alone, except for the occasional riverbank encounter. Either way, its presence is so commanding that solitude doesn't feel lonely, it feels earned. As you follow the sway of its neck, you notice small creatures moving around its body. Primitive crocodiles slip into the water at its feet, uninterested in tackling something so massive. Birds, or almost birds, hop along the mud, snapping up insects stirred by its steps. Even the trees bend their branches as though offering tribute. You realize that this dinosaur isn't just an animal, it's a landscape feature. Rivers flow, storms gather, and Aegyptosaurus just exists. The evening deepens, and shadows stretch long across the plain. You sit on a log, damp but comfortable, and let yourself breathe in rhythm with the giant. Its movements are so unhurried that your eyelids grow heavy just watching. The rustle of leaves, the creak of its bones, the low thunder of its footsteps, all blend into a lullaby written 95 million years ago. You close your eyes for a moment, imagining what it would feel like to reach out and touch its hide. Would it be warm, like sun-baked stone? Would the scales shift under your fingertips like armor plates? You open your eyes again, smiling at your own curiosity, and realize that in this dreamscape, there's no harm in leaning into the fantasy. So you stand, walk forward, and lay your hand gently against its leg. The skin feels rougher than you expected, but alive, flexing with muscle, humming faintly with the vibration of a giant heart. The creature doesn't notice, or maybe it does and simply doesn't care. After all, to Aegyptosaurus, you're smaller than the insects buzzing in the air. It takes another step, lifting its body forward, and you move with it, caught in its orbit like a moon trailing a planet. The moon above, by the way, looks almost the same as the one you'll see tonight out your window. That's the strange comfort of all this. The same pale disk glowed over Aegyptosaurus as it does over you. Whole empires have risen and fallen since then, but the moon hasn't bothered to change its look. Reliable, eternal, like a nightlight that never burns out. The giant lowers its head, grabs another mouthful of leaves, and chews. You yawn in sympathy. Dinner for it, bedtime for you. And just as you start to drift again, you hear that answering vibration from far across the floodplain. A second call, a second presence. You smile. Looks like the night isn't done showing you what moves in the shadows. The sound comes again, a deep vibration through the mud and water, and your gaze shifts toward the river itself. The Aegyptosaurus you've been following pauses mid-chew, neck angled, as if it, too, feels the subtle tremor of something sharing this world. You turn your head slowly, because in a land like this, caution isn't paranoia, it's common sense. The river looks calm at first, wide and brown, its surface dotted with lily pads and rippling as schools of fish flash below. But just beneath that calm is a power you can almost taste. The water swells suddenly as if something beneath it exhales. And then, with a slow inevitability, the broad snout of Sarcosuchus breaks the surface. If the Aegyptosaurus was a walking suspension bridge, this creature is a living battleship. 40 feet long, armored, and jawed like a nightmare, Sarcosuchus drifts forward with deceptive grace. You feel the same instinctive chill you'd get if an alligator slid into the swimming pool where you'd just been floating, except multiplied by about 10. And yet, because you're just a quiet time traveler tonight, the fear only sharpens your attention. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Sarcosuchus, sometimes nicknamed Super Croc, really did patrol these waters during the mid-Cretaceous. It wasn't quite as enormous as early media hype suggested. Scientists have argued about exaggerated size estimates for years, but it was still a predator so powerful that it could snap a turtle in half like a potato chip. The Aegyptosaurus barely reacts. It shifts its feet, careful near the muddy edge, but the giant croc isn't here for something that size. Instead, Sarcosuchus slides closer to a school of massive fish that churn the surface with frantic tails. The river explodes in foam and scales as jaws close with a sickening crunch. You flinch instinctively, though the sound is strangely muted here, like listening through a dream filter. And there's your quirky tidbit. Some paleontologists believe Sarcosuchus's long snout wasn't just for grabbing prey, but for lifting and tossing it, a kind of prehistoric food-flinging maneuver. You imagine the absurdity of a 40-foot reptile catapulting fish across the shallows like some twisted dinner show. Nearby, smaller creatures scuttle at the water's edge. Primitive turtles, frogs, and fish-eating birds with teeth in their beaks. One dives with surprising speed, emerging with a wriggling silver prize. You almost laugh. It looks like a modern pelican trying too hard to cosplay as a velociraptor. The river is alive with competition, a stage where everyone from insects to leviathans plays their part. Historians still argue whether Sarcosuchus hunted dinosaurs outright. Some think it could have lunged at the legs of smaller sauropods or unwary juveniles. Others suggest it stuck mainly to aquatic prey, ruling the rivers but rarely daring to challenge giants like the one you're following. Tonight, the question hangs unanswered because the Aegyptosaurus doesn't stray too close and the croc doesn't test its luck. You're left in that delicious tension of maybe, a debate stretching across millions of years, unresolved and whispering. You crouch again at the muddy bank, feeling the dampness seep between your toes, and listen. The air hums with insects, wings vibrating at pitches so high they almost merge into one steady note. Pterosaurs skim the surface, their wings catching flashes of moonlight. Some dive for fish, others seem to skim just for the joy of it. You can't help but grin, because no matter how terrifying the crocs are, some creatures are clearly out here having fun. The Aegyptosaurus lowers its neck to drink, slurping water in great gulps. You think about how much liquid it must need to sustain itself. Gallons upon gallons every day, probably enough to empty your kitchen sink in one sitting. Watching it drink is hypnotic. Water streams down its chin, rippling into the river, as if it's feeding the very environment that sustains it. You shift your gaze back to the Sarcosuchus, which now lies almost motionless, just eyes and nostrils above the surface. Patient, eternal, a reptilian statue that only moves when hunger demands. The kind of predator that makes you appreciate your modern life, where the only ambush you face near water is from mosquitoes or, if unlucky, your neighbor's sprinkler system. The night grows richer, filled with layered sounds, the bellow of distant dinosaurs, the splash of fish, the steady crunch of leaves between massive jaws. You feel it all vibrating through the ground, through the air, through your bones. It's like the earth itself is humming a lullaby. You lean back on your elbows, staring up at the stars. The constellations aren't quite the same. Continents have shifted, skies have tilted, but enough is familiar that you can still pick out Orion's belt, faint but visible. The same stars that look down on Sarcosuchus and Aegyptosaurus now look down on you. That realization makes your eyelids feel heavier. And just when you're about to drift fully into that half-sleep, the Aegyptosaurus steps forward again, leading you along the riverbank. You rise, stretch, and follow. Behind you, Sarcosuchus sinks beneath the surface, leaving only ripples where it had been. The silence that follows is almost louder than the splash. You don't look back. You don't need to. The river is full of shadows, and you know it will always be alive with movement, even if you're not there to watch. You keep walking along the riverbank, the mud soft against your heels, until the reeds part again and you see something that feels out of place in this dream. Not a living creature, but a scatter of bones. White, bleached by sun and water, half buried in silt. They jut up at odd angles, ribs like picket fences, vertebrae like weathered stepping stones. For a moment you hesitate, because the sight of bones always nudges your mind toward endings. But then you remember, you came here not only to see these creatures alive, but also to understand how they return to us through fragments. You crouch by the nearest rib and brush away wet sand. It feels almost sacrilegious, like you're breaking the time travel illusion, but you remind yourself that this is part of the story too. Every giant eventually stumbles. Every skeleton waits patiently for someone to find it. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Aegyptosaurus was first described in 1932 by German paleontologist Ernst Stromer, who also discovered Spinosaurus in the same region. Stromer's expeditions to Egypt were grueling, endless heat, relentless insects, sandstorms that erased camp overnight. His team hauled crates of fossils back across desert and sea, eventually shipping them to Munich. Those crates contained much of what the world knew about North Africa's Cretaceous giants. And then came tragedy. In 1944, during World War II, Allied bombers destroyed the Munich Museum. Stromer's Aegyptosaurus fossils, already fragile, already incomplete, were reduced to ash and rubble. Nearly everything he had gathered vanished in one night. Imagine the heartbreak, decades of sweat and discovery erased in hours. 4 years afterward, paleontologists trying to study Aegyptosaurus had little more than Stromer's notes and sketches. The bones you picture in the sand tonight are echoes of bones that, in our own time, no longer exist. You tilt your head, watching moonlight silver the skeleton at your feet. It's strange. When you see a giant alive, it feels eternal. But when you see its bones, the fragility hits you. Creatures that once ruled entire landscapes, reduced to brittle souvenirs of time. Here's a quirky tidbit that might lift the gloom. During Stromer's digs, his field team had to sleep with their shoes tied to their hammocks. Jackals and wild dogs would sneak into camp at night and steal them. Imagine the scene: exhausted scientists, precious fossils, and a pack of opportunistic canines making off with the footwear. Somehow, even in the shadow of titans, life insists on comedy. Historians still argue whether Stromer himself fully realized the importance of Aegyptosaurus when he named it. Some say he considered it just another sauropod, overshadowed by his flashier find, Spinosaurus. Others believe he sensed the uniqueness of a North African giant at a time when most known sauropods came from South America or Europe. But the war cut short the debate. The arguments continue in academic circles even now, with every new bone discovered in Niger or Morocco reigniting the conversation. You rise slowly, leaving the skeleton behind, and walk deeper into the floodplain. The air smells faintly metallic, like wet stone, and you notice half-fossilized logs protruding from the mud. Time doesn't just preserve bones. It sometimes turns entire forests into stone. You trail your fingers along the polished surface of one trunk, streaked with quartz and iron, and marvel that you're touching wood and rock at the same time. Farther ahead, another Aegyptosaurus shifts its weight, the living and the dead coexisting in your line of sight. You feel the weight of that paradox, that history is always balancing life with loss. You glance back one last time at the skeletal ribs sticking from the earth, and in the quiet you almost hear Stromer's careful pen scratching across paper, sketching shapes that would one day be lost to fire. The giant in the distance takes a step forward, shaking the ground, and your focus returns to the present. Well, the prehistoric present. You inhale deeply, the air heavy with moisture and memory, and follow. The past leaves clues, but it never stands still. You follow the lumbering sauropod across a stretch of cracked earth where the river has recently retreated, leaving shallow pools shimmering like scattered mirrors. The moon hangs low now, a pale lantern floating above this Cretaceous night, and its light makes the mud glisten silver. You notice faint tracks pressed into the ground, some fresh, others hardened like pottery, footprints of giants, yes, but also smaller ones. Clawed marks, delicate scratches, trails of something that scampered away long before you arrived. You pause, kneeling to trace one of those smaller impressions. It's no Aegyptosaurus print. Too light, too narrow. Maybe a small theropod, maybe an early mammal scuttling along the water's edge. For a heartbeat, you imagine it as one of your own distant ancestors, tiny and forgettable in a world of titans. You almost laugh. Our lineage wasn't exactly impressive back then. Little creatures darting at night, probably praying not to get stepped on. And yet, here you are millions of years later, standing tall while Aegyptosaurus and its kin are only memories. Evolution plays the longest game of all. And here's your mainstream historical fact. Evidence suggests that hominins, the branch of primates that would one day become human, wouldn't emerge for another 90 million years after this scene. Still, early mammalian relatives existed in this world. They were nocturnal, small-bodied, mostly insect eaters, and utterly unremarkable compared to the dinosaurs they shared the land with. They lived in shadows, surviving not by strength but by patience and adaptability. You stand again, brushing mud from your fingers, and glance at the giant ahead of you. Imagine what stories early humans must have told when stumbling upon dinosaur bones millennia later. Quarries in the deserts of Egypt, Libya, and Morocco were littered with strange fossils, long before science gave them names. Nomadic tribes might have unearthed them and woven tales of desert monsters, colossal serpents, or long-dead gods buried in the sand. The bones were there, waiting. Humanity just wasn't ready to understand them yet. Here's a quirky tidbit. In ancient Greece, villagers sometimes mistook massive fossilized femurs for the bones of giants from their myths. Entire shrines were built around them, with offerings left to honor what they thought were fallen heroes. It isn't hard to imagine similar misunderstandings in North Africa, where bones of Aegyptosaurus or Spinosaurus might have peeked from eroded cliffs. Instead of titans from millions of years ago, they might have been seen as divine relics or omens. Historians still argue whether myths of dragons or leviathans in desert cultures were inspired by fossil finds. Some dismiss the idea as coincidence, others point to the undeniable awe such bones provoke. After all, when you stumble on a vertebra the size of a dinner plate, your imagination is bound to spark. Tonight, crouching by the moonlit trackways, you find yourself siding with the dreamers. Why wouldn't a herdsman, centuries ago, look at bones like these and weave a story of sky beasts or buried gods? The Aegyptosaurus shifts again, tail sweeping like a lazy pendulum, and you follow. But now you're aware not only of its presence, but of the invisible threads tying it to your own species. One day, humans would walk the same sands, camp near the same rivers, and puzzle over the same fossils. You picture a nomad pausing by an exposed rib, the wind filling their ears with whispers, and for a moment, time collapses. You and they both stand here, one with a smartphone waiting back on the nightstand, the other with only the stars for company, both staring at the bones of something beyond comprehension. You continue along the bank, and the night seems softer now. Crickets, well, prehistoric cousins of crickets, sing in the reeds. You hear the flapping of wings as another pterosaur lifts into the air, heading toward the rising moon. The Aegyptosaurus trudges on, as steady as time itself, and you fall into step beside it, marveling at how the story of giants has always brushed against the story of us. The mud squishes under your feet, leaving your own small trail beside the massive prints. You glance back once, seeing both tracks together, the giant and the dreamer. If a future traveler stumbled on them, what story would they tell? The night deepens, but the floodplain glows with a faint silver mist, the kind that rises when warm mud exhales into cooler air. The Aegyptosaurus slows its walk, lowering its neck again, but not to drink. This time, it's feeding, methodical, patient, endless. You pause to watch, realizing you've stepped into the most ordinary part of its day, dinner. For an animal this size, eating isn't a task, it's a lifestyle. The creature presses its jaws into a stand of leafy branches, stripping foliage with a sound like wet paper tearing. Its teeth are peg-shaped, not sharp, designed to rake greens rather than slice them. You imagine what it must be like to carry hundreds of those teeth, each one more like a garden tool than a weapon. Bite after bite, it pulls in mouthfuls, chews just enough to swallow, then moves on. It doesn't need variety, no sauces, no seasonings. Just leaf after leaf, branch after branch, and all-you-can-eat salad bars stretching across the continent. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Sauropods like Aegyptosaurus likely consumed hundreds of pounds of vegetation every single day. Their digestive systems were vast fermentation chambers, where plant matter could sit for days, slowly broken down by bacteria and gases. It's possible they swallowed stones, gastroliths, to help grind food in their stomachs, a trick borrowed from modern birds. You lean against a nearby log and listen to the chewing rhythm. Crunch, grind, swallow. It's hypnotic, like the tick of a clock designed to lull you rather than rush you. Each motion is deliberate, never hurried. This giant isn't worried about running out of time. Its entire existence is time, stretched across years like a lazy river. And then, a quirky image flickers into your mind. If you could somehow bottle all the methane produced by one herd of sauropods, you'd probably power a small town's worth of stoves for months. Imagine the world's first dinosaur-powered barbecue. Not exactly eco-friendly, but the thought makes you chuckle softly in the dark. You step closer, and the smell hits you, pungent, earthy, the scent of crushed plants and damp breath. Not unpleasant, exactly. More like standing near a compost heap that's alive and still chewing. You wrinkle your nose, then laugh quietly, because of course a creature this size would carry its own weather system of smells. Historians still argue whether sauropods like Aegyptosaurus fed mainly at mid-level heights or if they could rear up, balancing on their hind legs to reach treetops. Some scientists suggest their spines and muscles weren't built for dramatic rearing, while others insist the evidence points to occasional high browsing. Watching this one tonight, you picture both, the easy sweep of its neck across mid-level foliage, and in rare moments, the sheer spectacle of a 15-meter body lifting to pluck leaves from the sky. The herd you sensed earlier is closer now. A low rumble spreads across the floodplain, answered by the giant at your side. Through the mist, other silhouettes appear, 3, maybe 4 more Aegyptosaurs, their necks moving like slow oars through water. They spread out, each tackling its own patch of greenery, yet their chewing overlaps into a kind of prehistoric chorus. Crunch, grind, swallow. Crunch, grind, swallow. You close your eyes and let the sound wash over you, a lullaby built from patience and hunger. One of them exhales sharply, a snort that sends a flock of insect-catching birds fluttering into the air. Their wings glimmer briefly before vanishing into the night. The herd doesn't even look up. Dinner is the only priority. You think about your own meals, how fast you sometimes eat, rushing through breakfast with one eye on the clock, or grabbing dinner over a glowing screen. Watching these giants reminds you that eating can be an act of presence, a slow tether to the world around you. No rush, no multitasking. Just bite, breathe, repeat. The ground is littered with shredded twigs and half-crushed leaves, leftovers from jaws that didn't bother to be neat. You bend down and pick up a fragment, holding it to the moonlight. It's sticky with sap, still warm from the giant's breath. You drop it again, smiling because even the scraps here feel enormous. The air thickens with mist, with smell, with the steady pulse of chewing. Somewhere far off, thunder rolls, but the herd doesn't stir. They're content in their meal, and you find yourself swaying slightly in rhythm with them, like a sleeper rocking in time with an unseen tide. Eventually, you yawn. You can't help it, their patience is contagious. You glance at the herd, necks rising and dipping, tails swaying like pendulums, and you know they'll still be here long after you drift into sleep. Eating, digesting, existing. Their life is slow, but somehow it feels like wisdom. The chewing chorus fades into background hum as the night deepens, but you can't ignore the way the air thickens with a new tension. The floodplain, moments ago a sleepy buffet, suddenly feels like a stage where another act is about to begin. Even the Aegyptosaurus herd shifts uneasily, tails sway wider, feet press deeper into the mud, and the slow chewing pauses now and then, as if the giants sense eyes in the dark. You glance toward the far edge of the river, where reeds bend without wind. Something stirs. At first it looks like a shadow slipping between shadows, but then the surface ripples and a broad sail rises above the grass. Your breath catches Spinosaurus. It moves differently than the sauropods, quicker, more fluid, like a crocodile taught to walk upright. That sail, tall and ridged, cuts across the horizon like a misplaced ship mast. The predator stalks the shallows with a fisherman's patience, tail sweeping, claws flexing. You know it's after fish, yet the thought of its jaws snapping shut on anything unlucky enough to stand nearby sends a shiver down your spine. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Spinosaurus is thought to be the largest carnivorous dinosaur ever discovered, longer even than Tyrannosaurus rex. Its body was built for semi-aquatic life, with crocodile-like jaws and dense bones that helped it dive. Fossil evidence from Stromer's ill-fated expeditions first revealed it, though much like Aegyptosaurus, most of those fossils were lost in the war. The Aegyptosaurs hold their ground but edge slightly away from the riverbank. They're not panicking, but there's a stiffness in their posture, as though remembering old instincts. A giant like Spinosaurus might not dare tackle a full-grown sauropod, but a calf or a straggler. That risk lingers like static in the air. And then the reeds quiver again, this time on the opposite side of the plain. A second shape emerges, broader, lower, with jaws lined like a saw. Cretaceous. If Spinosaurus is a fisherman, this one is a land hunter, built for lunges and bone-crushing bites. The two predators don't notice each other right away, each absorbed in their own silent calculations. You can feel the tension stretching between them like a drawn bowstring. Here's a quirky tidbit for you. Some paleontologists nicknamed Cretaceous the shark-toothed lizard because its teeth resembled those of great white sharks, serrated, curved, perfect for slicing flesh. Imagine a shark deciding to take a vacation on land and still being terrifyingly good at its job. That's the energy radiating from this shadow. Historians still argue whether Spinosaurus and Cretaceous truly shared the same hunting grounds or whether their fossils were jumbled together by rivers and shifting sands. Some believe they coexisted, competing at the top of the food chain. Others argue they were separated by time or habitat. Tonight, in your drifting vision, they stand on either side of the herd, both real, both alive, both waiting. The Aegyptosaurus nearest you exhales in a long, low rumble. It isn't fear exactly, it's a reminder. You hear it vibrate through the ground, as though the herd is reminding each other of their collective weight. One sauropod might falter, but many together are a wall of flesh and bone too daunting for even apex predators. The giants shuffle into a tighter formation, tails outward, necks weaving above like a living barricade. You crouch low in the reeds, though of course you know you're only a dreamer here. Still, instinct makes you hide. Your heartbeat ticks louder than the insects. Spinosaurus lunges suddenly, jaws flashing, not at the sauropods, but at a thrashing school of river fish. Water explodes upward, droplets glittering in the moonlight like scattered jewels. The predator clamps its prize and thrashes its head, spraying foam across the bank. Across the way, Cretaceous snarls, frustrated, pacing like a cat denied entry. The Aegyptosaurus herd doesn't wait for the situation to escalate. Slowly, deliberately, they begin to move, their synchronized steps shaking the ground. It isn't a run, it's a dignified withdrawal, as if saying, "You may prowl, but we choose when to leave." You trail beside them, relief easing your shoulders. Behind you, the predators linger in the mist, each consumed by hunger, each unwilling to test their luck against giants tonight. Spinosaurus fades back into the reeds, sail lowering like a vanishing flag. Cretaceous growls once more, then turns into the shadows. The plain exhales, the tension dissolving like a nightmare after waking. You walk with the herd farther into open ground, marveling at the quiet strength of their strategy. Not speed, not claws, not teeth, just presence. And as the night sky glitters overhead, you realize that sometimes survival isn't about fighting. It's about simply being too vast to ignore. The floodplain breathes differently now, each step carrying you through a world that is rhythmically shaped by water, by drought, and by the pulse of prehistoric life. You notice the riverbed ahead, now partially dry, revealing sandbars cracked into jagged patterns like old parchment. Pools of water linger, reflecting the moonlight, and each one is a miniature ecosystem buzzing with activity. Fish flicking their tails, insects skimming the surface, small amphibians hopping clumsily from puddle to puddle. The landscape itself seems alive with change. You follow the Aegyptosaurus herd along the receding river, feeling the subtle undulations beneath your feet as if the land itself is breathing. One day it floods, the next it dries. Life here isn't static. Survival hinges on adaptability, and every creature moves in silent acknowledgement of this truth. You glance at the giants, their necks reaching for green patches that cling stubbornly to the muddy margins. One of them shifts its weight carefully, then pauses, sniffing the air, perhaps sensing the next seasonal change. Here's your mainstream historical fact. The mid-Cretaceous Sahara, where Aegyptosaurus roamed, experienced distinct wet and dry seasons. Rivers that swelled during the rains would retreat in the dry months, leaving behind mudflats, exposed fish, and temporary watering holes. The life cycles of plants and animals were intricately tied to these cycles, making the landscape a constant dance of feast and scarcity. You move closer to the nearest waterhole and peer into the muddy reflection. Tiny ripples form as insects skim the surface, creating intricate patterns. And then a young crocodile, less than a quarter of its adult size, slides silently into the shallow pool. You can almost sense the tension as it flicks its tail, eyes locked on the movement of small fish. Even in miniature, the predator-prey dance plays out with exquisite precision. Quirky detail. Some paleontologists suggest that these seasonal floodplains created opportunities for opportunistic feeding behaviors among herbivorous dinosaurs. When pools shrank, young Aegyptosaurs might accidentally find themselves knee-deep in water teeming with fish or frogs. Of course, they weren't fishing on purpose, but the occasional surprise snack might have been swallowed purely by accident. You chuckle at the thought of a giant sauropod accidentally catching a fish mid-step. Historians still argue whether Aegyptosaurus and its contemporaries migrated seasonally like modern elephants or whether they moved more locally, responding to daily changes in vegetation and water availability. Fossil evidence hints at both behaviors. Tracks stretching hundreds of kilometers suggest long treks, while clustered nesting sites suggest periods of local stability. Watching these giants tonight, you imagine both. Slow migrations across floodplains punctuated by periods of stillness where food is abundant and movement unnecessary. The herd pauses near a patch of taller conifers, leaves heavy with dew from the night mist. The Aegyptosaurus dips its head, plucking greenery with the same deliberate patience you've come to admire. You can almost feel the slow digestion ahead, the fermentation chambers inside massive bellies turning the day's feasting into life-sustaining energy. Their breathing is steady, rumbling softly through the ground like the distant roll of waves. Above you, a small pterosaur arcs silently through the air, wings extended in perfect glide. Its shadow dances across the water's surface, landing briefly on a sandbar before lifting again. You realize how interconnected everything here is. Water feeds the plants, plants feed the giants, giants disturb the mud, and the disturbed mud attracts insects, fish, and small predators. Life pulses in cycles, each dependent on the rhythm of the flood and drought. You pause, letting the quiet floodplain settle into your senses. The Aegyptosaurus herd continues onward, one step at a time, moving through this mutable landscape as if it were a ritual. You notice that even as the water shrinks, even as the mud cracks and hardens, the giants press forward, their survival a testament to patience and persistence. The land might shift beneath them, but they adapt, slow and unhurried, a masterclass in enduring the whims of nature. The air carries a faint metallic scent, probably from iron in the mud exposed by the retreating waters. You inhale deeply, tasting the cool dampness mixed with the warmth of the soil, and for a moment you feel tethered to the same rhythms that have governed this world for millions of years. Every footfall, every ripple, every soft exhale of breath is a reminder that existence itself is a series of adjustments, a constant negotiation between being and becoming. You sit for a moment on a smooth, wet rock, watching the herd move into the distance, their massive forms silhouetted against the moonlit horizon. The floodplain stretches before you, endless and slow, teaching you that in the grand flow of time, patience is survival and observation is wisdom. You exhale, letting the cool night air fill your lungs, and feel a serene connection to the land, the water, and the giants who have walked it for ages. The night grows softer, cooler, and you begin to notice details you hadn't before. The Aegyptosaurus herd moves at a deliberate pace, but now your attention shifts from their massive bodies to the textures and motions that make them alive. Their skin, for instance, is not uniformly scaled. Pebbly patches alternate with smoother areas, creating a tactile map across their backs and flanks. You imagine running your hand along it, rough and warm in places, almost pliable, yielding slightly under pressure, yet resilient like old leather. Every fold and crevice speaks of millions of years of evolution honing a surface designed to withstand sun, rain, and the occasional rubbing against a branch or rock. You notice the subtle sway of muscles under that thick hide. Each step reverberates through legs built like pillars, yet there's elegance in the movement. Tendons stretch, joints bend with surprising fluidity. Their tails, long and whip-like, swing gently side to side, not aggressively, but as if keeping time with some invisible metronome. You think about the force contained in that pendulum, enough to flatten small shrubs or knock over a precarious log, yet controlled, measured, almost choreographed. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Titanosaurs like Aegyptosaurus possessed unique adaptations in their vertebrae and pelvic structures that distributed their immense weight efficiently. This allowed them to support bodies over 15 meters long without collapsing under gravity. Their tails might have been used for balance, signaling to herd members, or even producing low-frequency sounds for communication, a kind of prehistoric bass that vibrated through the earth. You bend closer to the mud, watching small tracks left by companion species, tiny dinosaurs, mammals, even insects that skittered unnoticed underfoot. It occurs to you how vast the sensory world must have been for a giant like Aegyptosaurus. Its eyes perched high, scanning for predators or the ripest leaves. Its nostrils wide, detecting distant scents. Its inner ears sensitive enough to feel low rumbles from far-off footsteps or river currents. You realize that while we rely on sight and sound primarily, these creatures lived in a multi-sensory tapestry you can only begin to imagine. A quirky detail arises in your mind. Some paleontologists have suggested that sauropods might have had small keratinous spines or bumps along their backs, like a subtle mohawk. Nothing extravagant, nothing flamboyant, but enough to influence airflow, shed rain, or even play a role in mating displays. Imagine a creature this massive, casually rocking a hairdo that is both functional and fashionable. You smile at the absurdity, feeling the gentle humor of evolution whispering through time. Historians still argue whether the skin of Aegyptosaurus bore patterns or colors for camouflage, display, or simple thermoregulation. Fossil impressions are scarce, leaving speculation as the only way to color their world. Perhaps they were muted browns and greens, blending with the floodplain. Or perhaps streaks of reds and yellows shimmered in sunlight, warning predators. Or maybe just other sauropods, of their presence. Tonight, in your drifting dream, you see hints of both possibilities, patches of iridescence flickering under the moonlight. You kneel beside a low pool and watch a reflection of a giant's neck dip to drink. The scales catch the moonlight, each tiny ridge and crease magnified in the rippling water. You notice how the muscles ripple beneath the skin, the throat expanding as water slides down, swallowed with deliberate patience. It's intimate, unhurried, mesmerizing. In the distance, other creatures add texture to the night. Small lizards, amphibians, and nocturnal birds shift quietly among reeds. Their movements might seem inconsequential to a giant, yet they are part of the ecosystem's rhythm. You realize that every living thing contributes to the soundscape, to the movement, to the pulse of the Cretaceous night. You stretch out, letting the damp earth warm your hands and face. Watching the Aegyptosaurus herd continue their slow journey, you begin to feel the night's lull, the gentle pull of time as it drifts across the floodplain. You notice how the low-frequency vibrations of their steps ripple through the ground, a pulse you can almost sync with. Closing your eyes, you imagine the whisper of scales brushing against leaves, the subtle shifting of massive feet in mud, the low rumble of distant rivers. It's a symphony written in patience, texture, and quiet power. The giants march onward, and you follow, absorbing the tactile, visual, and auditory richness around you. Each detail, from skin to sway to shadow, stitches you closer to the slow heartbeat of this ancient world. You exhale slowly, letting the sensory depth of the night seep into your own body, a gentle reminder that life's enormity comes in both motion and texture, and sometimes, the smallest observation holds the deepest comfort. The moon climbs higher now, casting long silver ribbons across the floodplain, and the Aegyptosaurus herd slows, as if sensing the deepening night. You notice a subtle shift in the world around you, the calls of nocturnal birds, the soft plop of fish into remaining pools, the rustle of insects weaving invisible trails through the mist. Even the wind seems to hold its breath, carrying the scent of wet earth and foliage. It's a lullaby that is both gentle and profound, the kind that seeps into your bones and slows your heartbeat in tandem with the giants. You watch one Aegyptosaurus carefully bend its massive legs, lowering its body toward the ground. The movement is slow, deliberate, almost ceremonial. You can't imagine how precarious it must be, legs designed to support 15 tons folding just enough to allow a moment of rest. It lowers itself, tail swaying to counterbalance, neck arcing high before settling toward the soft earth. Another follows, mirroring the first, and soon the herd forms a quiet, low line of resting giants, bodies pressed into the cool floodplain. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Evidence suggests that sauropods likely rested while standing for short periods, but they may have lain down for longer, deeper sleep, especially during nighttime. Their massive size made them relatively safe from many predators, and herd behavior would have added an extra layer of protection. The very scale of their bodies meant few creatures dared approach, allowing moments of vulnerability without consequence. You kneel behind a reed, observing without disturbing, and you begin to notice details of their rest. Eyes half closed, tails curled lazily, occasional twitches of the jaw as some continue slow chewing even while lying down. It's a world in motion and stillness simultaneously, a blend of diligence and reprieve. You realize how rare it is to witness a moment of peace in a predator-rich environment. Even as Spinosaurus and Carcharodontosaurus linger in distant shadows, the Aegyptosaurus herd remains composed, anchored by size, patience, and shared vigilance. Quirky tidbit: some scientists speculate that titanosaur herds may have used low-frequency vocalizations while resting to maintain contact. Imagine a low, rumbling hum traveling through the ground and air, letting all members of the herd know that everyone is safe and accounted for. You smile at the idea of giants humming lullabies to each other, a prehistoric bedtime chorus you can almost feel vibrating through the soil. Historians still argue whether these nocturnal pauses were primarily for digestion, thermoregulation, or genuine rest. Evidence is scant, as sleeping positions rarely fossilize, but tracks and bone beds hint at regular patterns, suggesting these giants were disciplined in ways modern animals can scarcely match. Tonight, you accept all possibilities. Rest, digestion, vigilance. They blend seamlessly in this slow dance of survival. You stretch your legs slightly, matching the soft sway of the herd, letting your own body sync with their rhythm. The night sounds, once bright and sharp, fade into gentle layers. The hiss of insects, the distant splash of water, the low, resonant rumble from enormous chests. It's mesmerizing, hypnotic even, and your eyelids grow heavier with each inhale and exhale. The reflection of moonlight on still water adds to the serenity. You watch droplets glisten on scales and leaves, tiny prisms of light that seem to pause time for just a moment. One of the giants exhales, a cloud of warm, damp air that rises like incense over the mudflats. You breathe it in, letting it mingle with your own sense of calm, feeling strangely cocooned by the presence of these enormous, gentle beings. As you lean against a log, the herd's subtle movements lull you further. There is no urgency here, no frantic chase, no need to act, just presence. It's a meditation in motion, a reminder that sometimes the world's largest creatures can teach the quietest lessons. Each rise and fall of the herd's breathing matches your own. Each swaying tail, each dip of a head, becomes a metronome guiding you deeper into this timeless night. You close your eyes briefly, imagining the ripple of scales, the sway of tails, the low hum through the ground. It's easy to let the mind drift, to follow the gentle rhythm into a half-sleep where the boundaries between you and these ancient giants blur. And yet, even in this semi-conscious state, you feel protected, held in the vast, enduring calm of a world that has moved, breathed, and survived for millions of years. The herd remains in its quiet slumber, the floodplain now hushed except for the soft sigh of wind through the reeds and the occasional splash of nocturnal fish. You notice the subtle vibrations in the ground, the low hum of massive bodies settled into mud and shallow pools. Each step, each shift, each breath is magnified by scale, yet softened by the night. It's hypnotic, like the world itself is breathing alongside you. As you follow along the edge of the herd, your gaze drifts to the distant horizon where the first hints of pre-dawn light are brushing the sky with muted purple and silver. The night hasn't fully lifted, but it has begun to yield to a slow, careful transition. A liminal time where the creatures of land and water prepare for the coming day. The air holds both chill and moisture, and your senses stretch to capture the richness, the scent of wet mud, crushed leaves, and distant flowers that have survived the long night. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Evidence from fossilized trackways suggests that sauropods moved in predictable paths across floodplains, often returning to similar watering holes or feeding grounds seasonally. Their footprints, sometimes preserved in hardened mud, reveal not only stride length but also subtle hints about their gait, posture, and social behavior. In essence, they left a diary written in the earth, accessible only to those patient enough to read it. You pause by a shallow pool, watching a juvenile Aegyptosaurus stir. It's smaller than the adults, still awkward in its long limbs, yet it mimics the slow, deliberate movements of its elders. You can almost see it learning the rhythm of the herd, the art of patience, the quiet diplomacy of massive beings coexisting in tight quarters. Its steps are tentative at first, sinking slightly too deep in mud before adjusting, each motion a lesson in balance and timing. Quirky detail. Some paleontologists have speculated that young titanosaurs may have communicated with the herd through subtle body vibrations, tapping, nudging, or shifting weight to signal hunger, discomfort, or curiosity. Imagine a giant baby using seismic text to say, "Hey, I need more leaves over here." You can't help but smile at the thought of a miniature giant sending silent messages across the mud. Historians still argue whether juvenile Aegyptosaurs were fully dependent on their mothers or roamed in creches, groups of young under the supervision of several adults. Fossil evidence is patchy. Some finds suggest protective families, others suggest loosely associated young moving through the floodplain together. In your drifting perspective, both are plausible. You watch the little one nudge against a towering leg, feeling the reassuring presence of a massive guardian, then wander a few steps alone, testing the boundaries of independence. The river now glimmers faintly as dawn edges closer, reflecting the pale sky like scattered fragments of silver. Insects begin their morning chorus, barely noticeable but growing in intensity, adding texture to the quiet world. You notice small ripples along the water's surface, perhaps tadpoles, perhaps minnows, or maybe a gentle caress from a half-submerged croc just watching. Every detail contributes to the rich, layered ecosystem of the floodplain. You continue along with the herd, moving with careful awareness, mirroring the rhythm of their steps. The ground vibrates underfoot, a slow drumbeat that seems to echo in your chest. Every motion of the Aegyptosaurus, neck arcing, tail swaying, knees sinking and rising, teaches a lesson in patience and presence. You can feel yourself unwinding with them, the pace of your thoughts slowing to match the steady heartbeat of giants. A distant rustle among the reeds draws your attention. You catch a fleeting glimpse of another creature, a small predator, perhaps a nocturnal theropod finishing its last meal before retreating. It moves carefully, aware of the massive beings nearby, and disappears as silently as it appeared. You notice, once again, how scale dictates interaction. Life balances delicately between predator and prey, between movement and stillness, between shadow and light. As the floodplain fills with the soft light of dawn, the herd begins to rise. There's no rush, no sudden alarm, just a gradual transition from rest to activity, from stillness to careful exploration. You rise with them, stretching, breathing, moving slowly, feeling tethered to the slow, deliberate rhythm of life in this ancient world. Each step, each glance, each inhalation reminds you of the continuity of existence, how creatures survive, how ecosystems persist, and how time, vast and patient, shapes everything. The first full light of dawn spills across the floodplain, bathing everything in a soft gold that gradually warms the cool mist. You notice the Aegyptosaurus herd moving with renewed purpose, yet still with that unhurried majesty that has been their signature all night. Their massive bodies cast elongated shadows across the mudflats, stretching toward the pale river as if marking the path of time itself. You feel the pull of continuity, One step today, 1 million years ago, and 1 million years hence. You follow along the edge of the herd, listening to the subtle symphony of the early morning. The air vibrates with insect wings, the chatter of tiny amphibians, and the low, almost imperceptible hum of enormous bodies shifting. Water trickles from the river into small pools, feeding the floodplain in delicate streams that glitter in sunlight. You pause to dip your fingers into one shallow puddle, feeling the chill, the liquidity, the persistence of a cycle that has repeated countless times. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Aegyptosaurus and other titanosaurs likely moved between feeding grounds and water sources in regular patterns dictated by seasonal rains. Their migrations may have spanned dozens, even hundreds of kilometers, leaving trackways that persist in the fossil record as evidence of their careful, deliberate movement. These pathways were highways of survival, etched in mud and stone for eternity. You glance at one of the younger members of the herd, its neck stretching awkwardly toward a cluster of new leaves sprouting along the banks. You notice the tiny tussle of insects clinging to the wet foliage, oblivious to the giant mouth reaching for them. It's a reminder that life is layered, massive bodies moving alongside the minuscule, all existing in a delicate choreography. Quirky tidbit. Some paleontologists have proposed that titanosaurs could have used their tails for communication, not just for defense. A subtle sweep, a light tap against the ground, might have served as a message to other members of the herd. You imagine it like a giant Morse code, a language written in mud and vibration, telling friends and relatives, all's well. Move slowly. Feast continues. Historians still argue whether these visual and tactile communications were learned socially or instinctual. Fossilized trackways suggest synchronized movement, but whether it was conscious coordination or mere coincidence is unknown. Tonight, in your drifting observation, both possibilities exist comfortably. You watch a pair of adults lower their necks to graze in tandem, a quiet display of alignment that could be communication, affection, or simply efficiency. The floodplain's smaller inhabitants emerge as the light strengthens. Tiny reptiles scurry between the roots, amphibians croak intermittently, and a pterosaur glides low over the water, scanning for breakfast. Each motion feels choreographed against the backdrop of giants, as if life itself has designed a hierarchy of scale. The Aegyptosaurus herd moves through this network of life with confidence, aware of their power yet perfectly attuned to the smaller rhythms surrounding them. You notice how the soft soil captures their massive footprints, each one a mini landscape of pressure and gravity. You kneel to inspect one closely, tracing the depression with your fingers. You imagine that far in the future, humans might stumble across such impressions and wonder at the size, strength, and grace of creatures long vanished. And yet here you are, alive to witness it, a silent observer in a world that predates understanding. As the sun rises higher, the herd reaches a denser patch of vegetation. Branches creak as they press against leaves, the subtle sound blending with distant calls of other dinosaurs. You realize that the floodplain has changed dramatically over the night, from shadows and mist to light and motion, yet the giants remain a constant, their presence a slow, grounding rhythm. You inhale deeply, tasting the damp warmth, and feel the connection between the earth, the water, and the creatures moving through it. You follow the herd as it disperses slightly to forage more effectively, yet they remain within protective proximity. The landscape hums with subtle energy, the pulse of life renewed by light and warmth. You move alongside them, synchronized with their deliberate rhythm, a passenger in the long, slow unfolding of time, feeling each vibration, each rustle, each breath as part of the eternal flow. By mid-morning, the floodplain has transformed completely under the rising sun. The mist has lifted, replaced by a soft, hazy heat that ripples above the muddy flats. You feel it radiating from the ground, warming your feet as you follow the Aegyptosaurus herd. The air vibrates with life. Insects dart above the water's surface, small amphibians leap from puddle to puddle, and birds call from nearby trees, their songs sharp yet fleeting against the grandeur of this scene. Every sound is a thread in the tapestry of the floodplain, and you are, for now, a quiet observer woven into its pattern. The herd moves with steady precision, necks extended toward lush patches of conifers and cycads. Each mouthful of foliage is deliberate, measured, as if conserving energy for the long hours ahead. You notice how the sun glances off scales, highlighting subtle patterns, dim ridges, roughened patches, and faint hints of coloration that might have served as camouflage or signaling. You imagine the giants communicating silently, their massive bodies casting vibrations that travel through soil and air, a language of movement and presence. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Aegyptosaurus, like other titanosaurs, likely lived in herds that offered protection from predators. Fossil trackways suggest coordinated movement, allowing the giants to collectively detect threats while maintaining access to feeding grounds. This behavior would have been critical when faced with apex predators such as Carcharodontosaurus or Spinosaurus, who patrolled the rivers and floodplains in search of vulnerable prey. You pause by a shallow stream, watching the sunlight shimmer off the rippling water. A small group of fish darts beneath the surface, scattering when the shadow of a giant tail crosses overhead. You marvel at the subtle interconnections here: predator and prey, giant and minute, land and water. Everything exists in a delicate balance, and even the smallest ripple can ripple outward in unforeseen ways. Quirky tidbit: some paleontologists have speculated that sauropods may have used their long necks not only for feeding but also as a cooling system. By raising and lowering their heads, they could regulate airflow over their bodies and aid in thermoregulation. Imagine 15-meter-long heat pumps strolling slowly across the plains, adjusting their own climate without moving a single foot more than necessary. Historians still argue whether these neck movements were primarily functional, social, or a combination of both. Fossil evidence gives hints, but the true purpose remains a topic of debate. You watch an adult Aegyptosaurus lift its head, eyes scanning the horizon, neck forming a graceful arc before dipping again to graze. It is elegance and utility combined, a living testament to evolutionary engineering. Nearby, the younger members of the herd explore, stepping cautiously into shallow water and retreating quickly, their curiosity tempered by instinct. One nudges a half-submerged branch, sending it bobbing downstream. It's playful, yet each action is a practice in understanding the landscape, learning where footing is safe, where food grows, where danger might lurk unseen. You can almost hear the silent lessons passed down through generations, a prehistoric mentorship delivered without words. You rise slowly and walk beside the herd, feeling the subtle vibration of their steps underfoot. The floodplain stretches endlessly in every direction, a patchwork of mud, water, and vegetation, each section telling a story of survival and adaptation. Sunlight falls in golden beams, illuminating dust motes and insects that hover in a slow, deliberate dance. You realize the rhythm of the world here is measured, patient, yet persistent, a testament to endurance across time and circumstance. As the morning deepens, distant calls echo from the riverbank, perhaps pterosaurs in flight, perhaps crocodilians asserting territory. The herd responds only with slight adjustments, a minimal acknowledgement of other life forms in their domain. You feel the lesson settle into you. Presence and patience are more powerful than aggression, and slow, deliberate movement often secures survival better than speed or violence. Finally, you lean back against a fallen log, observing the giants and the life around them. Sunlight warms your skin, blending with the residual coolness of the morning mist. Everything here moves at its own pace, yet together it forms a cohesive symphony. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the rhythms of the floodplain, the sway of necks, the gentle thrum of footsteps, the whisper of water, pull you deeper into a sense of timelessness, a peaceful immersion in the ancient heartbeat of the world. The sun climbs higher, turning the floodplain into a mosaic of golden light and shifting shadows. Mudflats shimmer where water has pooled, and each tiny ripple catches the sunlight like liquid glass. You follow the Aegyptosaurus herd, now more active, gently pressing through shallow streams and low vegetation. Their enormous feet leave impressions that slowly fill with water, tiny ecosystems forming in their wake, mosquito larvae wriggling, small fish darting, and insects skimming the surface. It is a world of interconnections, subtle yet profound, and you feel yourself slowing to match its rhythm. You notice one adult pausing beside a fallen branch, nibbling at leaves just out of reach. Its long neck flexes with a grace that belies its size, muscles rippling beneath textured skin. Nearby, a juvenile mirrors the movement, tentative at first, then more confident as it mimics the adult's motions. You realize that observation and imitation are vital in this environment. The young learn by watching, and survival depends on these quiet lessons passed down through touch, gesture, and patience. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Titanosaurs, including Aegyptosaurus, likely had flexible necks with numerous vertebrae, enabling them to sweep vast areas of foliage without moving their massive bodies too far. This efficiency conserved energy and allowed them to feed for hours without the risk of overexertion, a critical adaptation for giants in a seasonal landscape. You step closer to the riverbank and watch small fish flicker beneath the water's surface. The Spinosaurus from the previous night is gone, but the water is alive with movement, a reminder that predators are never far away, even if unseen. The herd seems unconcerned, moving with measured assurance. It strikes you that confidence, size, and experience are as protective as speed or aggression in this ancient world. Quirky detail. Fossil evidence suggests that some titanosaurs swallowed small stones, gastroliths, to aid digestion. Imagine a creature the size of a house quietly crunching pebbles to help break down a salad the size of a tree. You can't help but chuckle at the image of these gentle giants dining with their built-in kitchen tools. Historians still argue whether gastroliths were deliberately chosen for their size and texture or merely ingested accidentally along with vegetation. Some think the stones were carefully selected, almost like prehistoric cutlery. Others argue it was random, a consequence of enthusiastic feeding. In your drifting observation, either scenario seems plausible. You follow the herd across a drier section of the floodplain, watching them navigate cracked mud with careful steps. Occasionally, one stops to drink from a small pool, ripples expanding across the surface, reflecting sunlight like scattered diamonds. The interaction of giant body and delicate water creates a strange poetry, immense power leaving subtle traces, imperceptible to anything but those attuned to detail. In the distance, a pterosaur glides low, wings reflecting sunlight, scanning for fish or insects. Its shadow passes over the herd, momentary and light, leaving no disturbance. You notice how the world is layered in motion and stillness. Enormous creatures moving deliberately, tiny predators and prey performing their own dances, all within the same ecosystem. You pause, allowing the warmth of the morning sun to wash over you, and notice how the herd communicates subtly, tail brushes, neck nudges, minor shifts in position. There is no shouting, no frantic signaling. It is quiet cooperation, ancient and instinctive. You sense that survival here depends not on chaos, but on harmonious participation in the rhythms of life. Finally, you lean against a smooth, warm boulder, observing the floodplain alive in sunlight. The Aegyptosaurus herd continues its slow journey, each step measured, each breath deliberate. The world around you thrums with vitality, yet everything moves with patient calm. You feel your own heartbeat begin to align with the gentle cadence of these giants, your thoughts slowing, your body unwinding, and your mind drifting further into the timeless lull of this ancient landscape. The heat of the day begins to settle into a gentle warmth, the sun no longer harsh but golden and mellow, casting long, soft shadows across the floodplain. You walk beside the Aegyptosaurus herd, now wandering into a denser grove of conifers and cycads. Leaves glint with dew that has survived the morning sun, droplets trembling before falling to the soft earth below. Everything feels quieter, slower, as though the world itself is exhaling after the long rhythm of night and morning. You notice subtle behaviors within the herd. An adult nudges a younger member to guide it past a tricky mud patch. Another shifts slightly, allowing a calf access to tender leaves. There is care in these movements, a quiet intelligence expressed in weight and patience rather than speed or sound. Even as you walk alongside them, you begin to feel the harmony, the shared understanding of space, safety, and sustenance. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Titanosaurs, including Aegyptosaurus, may have used herd behavior not only for protection against predators but also to support the young and ensure feeding efficiency. Fossilized trackways show group movement that hints at social structure, coordination, and perhaps even long-term memory of migratory routes. The floodplain you traverse has been molded by countless generations of giants moving in tandem, a living record in mud and vegetation. You lean close to a shallow stream, watching the water ripple around rocks and fallen leaves. Tiny fish dart beneath the surface, startled by your presence. Somewhere, a small croc slips quietly into the water, eyes barely above the surface. You feel the interconnectedness of life here, each creature playing a role in a complex ecosystem that has endured for millions of years. Quirky tidbit: some scientists suggest that the long tails of titanosaurs might have been used to send seismic signals through the ground. Imagine a giant brushing its tail across mud, sending a subtle vibration that another dinosaur miles away could detect. Like prehistoric texting, only more literal and slow motion. You can't help but smile at the thought of these titanic beings chatting through tremors and gentle thumps. Historians still argue whether tail-slapping behavior was for defense, communication, or courtship. Fossils and biomechanical models give clues, but much remains speculative. Observing the herd today, you imagine a combination: signals for warning, reassurance, and connection, all embedded in motion, weight, and rhythm. As the floodplain stretches outward, you notice a soft haze rising from the sun-warmed mud. The air smells faintly sweet with crushed vegetation and earthy moisture. The herd moves in unhurried synchronization, necks sweeping branches, tails brushing the ground, feet pressing into soft earth. The world is vast, and yet there is intimacy in every detail. The way light bends off scales, how shadows ripple across water, how small creatures scurry around colossal feet. You sit on a low rise, feeling the gentle vibrations of the herd's steps resonate through your body. The slow, deliberate cadence calms your mind, your thoughts unwinding as you synchronize with the heartbeat of this ancient ecosystem. The giants themselves become a kind of anchor, a grounding presence in a world both immense and detailed. The day continues to unfold, warm and calm. You notice the shadows lengthen again as the sun tilts westward, and the herd begins to move toward thicker vegetation for rest and shade. Your eyes follow their shapes, majestic, serene, perfectly adapted to this landscape. You feel a profound sense of completion, as if having witnessed not only a moment in time but also the enduring pulse of life itself. And now, as the herd settles under the soft canopy, you feel yourself ready to drift. The floodplain's rhythms, the giant's deliberate movements, and the layered chorus of life around you create a perfect lullaby. You exhale, releasing the weight of your own world, letting the timeless, slow cadence of this prehistoric realm guide you toward rest. Every detail, the swaying necks, the low rumbles, the shimmering pools, becomes a soft whisper, carrying you gently into a sense of calm and wonder. The sun dips lower now, its golden warmth softening into the gentle embrace of late afternoon. The floodplain quiets, every movement slowing, every sound stretching into a long, calming note. You sit on the soft earth, watching the Aegyptosaurus herd resting beneath the scattered canopy, their massive forms folded into the landscape like natural monuments. The mist has returned in delicate wisps, curling above puddles and low foliage, carrying with it the cool scent of wet earth and crushed leaves. Your eyes follow the subtle motion of a tail, a slow sway that stirs nothing but air, the gentle bend of a neck as an adult shifts to adjust its weight. Every exhale, every low rumble, resonates faintly through the soil, a steady vibration that seems to pulse through your own body. You feel yourself sinking into the rhythm, each heartbeat slowing, each breath lengthening. The world has become a soft, continuous lull, a place where time stretches and patience becomes tangible. Small creatures move quietly around you, frogs hopping from puddle to puddle, insects skimming water surfaces, birds landing softly in nearby branches. Even the smallest beings seem to respect the tranquil tempo of the giants, each step and sound carefully measured, contributing to a harmony you can almost feel more than hear. It is as if every organism in this ecosystem has learned the art of slow, deliberate existence, teaching you to do the same by example. The light continues to fade, painting the floodplain in shades of lavender and muted gold. Reflections ripple across the water as the last insects skim the surface. You notice the shimmer of scales in the evening light, the faint glint of dew on leaves, and the way shadows lengthen into soft, embracing forms. The Aegyptosaurus herd rests fully now, their great bodies blending into the landscape, breathing in unison with the earth itself. You exhale slowly, letting the tension of the day dissolve, allowing yourself to drift in time with the gentle sway of the giants. Thoughts fade, replaced by the soft awareness of presence. The sound of breathing, the weight of air, the faint vibrations from the earth beneath. You feel the slow heartbeat of life, vast yet intimate, and it carries you effortlessly towards sleep. Remember the lessons of this timeless night: patience, presence, and quiet observation. Let the rhythm of the floodplain guide you. Feel the gentle sway of the Aegyptosaurus necks, the warmth of the sun fading into soft shadows, and the lull of the water pooling around your feet. Each detail is a thread pulling you deeper into calm, a gentle reminder that the world continues in steady, reassuring cycles. Now your eyes grow heavy. You surrender to the slow pulse of this ancient ecosystem, allowing the hush of the floodplain, the measured exhalations of the giants, and the soft whispers of life all around to lull you fully into rest. You are part of this world, if only for a fleeting moment, and that presence is enough to carry you into deep, serene sleep.